From New York, this is Democracy Now!
Show me what the climate change looks like. This is what the climate change looks like. Show me what the climate change looks like. This is what the climate change looks like.
It's really, truly global, as all of these incredible demonstrations have been. This resistance is not just about the White House. It's about the fossil fuel industry taking over governments around the world. But people are not taking this quietly.
Over 200,000 people took part in the People's Climate March in Washington and in solidarity rallies across the country. The protests marked Donald Trump's 100th day in office. We'll air highlights from the day and hear from a state attorney general suing ExxonMobil, as well as U.S. senators pushing for a fossil-free future.
The Koch brothers must be sent a message that their science, which Donald Trump has adopted, is just as bogus as a degree from Trump University.
We will also hear from indigenous leaders fighting to protect the planet.
Maybe we, as original people of the United States and our people in Canada, Alaska, maybe it's time to really exercise our sovereignty and our self-determination and serve papers on this president to deport him from this country, because the laws that he's representing are not the natural laws that we're taught as Native people.
From the streets of the People's Climate March in Washington, D.C., all that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Hundreds of thousands, if not more than 1 million people, poured into the streets around the world on Saturday for a global People's Climate March, which coincided with President Trump's 100th day in office. As temperatures topped more than 95 degrees in Washington, D.C., tying the record for the hottest April 29th ever recorded in the Capitol, more than 200,000 people filled 20 blocks of Pennsylvania Avenue marching for climate, jobs, and justice. The protesters decried President Trump's steps to roll back environmental regulations, appoint climate change deniers as the heads of government agencies, and defund and erase climate change programs and research, including the Trump administration's move Friday to scrub climate science pages from the EPA's website. Sister marches were held in hundreds of U.S. cities, from New York City to the downpour in Chicago, to the snow in Denver, to Boston, Los Angeles, Miami, to Dutch Harbor, Alaska. Demonstrations were also held worldwide, including in Japan, Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, Germany, Greece, Brazil, Mexico, and Costa Rica. We'll spend the rest of the hour bringing you highlights from Democracy Now!'s live 5-hour broadcast at the People's Climate March in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, Saturday, extreme climate-fueled storms, tornadoes, and floods swept across the United States, killing at least 13 people. Tornadoes flattened homes, uprooted trees, and flipped trucks in Texas and in neighboring states. Historic flooding swept away cars, closed interstates, and inundated homes across Missouri, where the governor declared a state of emergency.
It's important for everyone to recognize again that some of the flooding we are seeing in parts of Missouri has surpassed historic levels. There are certain places that have seen water levels several feet higher than any time in Missouri's recorded history.
Heat waves also continue in South Asia, where temperatures in parts of India and Pakistan are soaring above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In India, heat waves killed 4,620 people over the last 4 years. President Trump held a rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Saturday night, during which he attacked immigrants, promised to build a wall on the border with Mexico, and lambasted the news media. Trump held the rally instead of going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C.
As you may know, there's another big gathering taking place tonight in Washington, D.C. Did you hear about it? A large group of Hollywood actors and Washington media are consoling each other in a hotel ballroom in our nation's capital right now. They are gathered together for the White House Correspondents' Dinner without the president.
President Trump is the first president to skip the White House Correspondents' Dinner since 1981, when President Ronald Reagan didn't attend because he was recovering from an assassination attempt. On Sunday, the day after the dinner, Chief of Staff Reince Priebus said the White House has looked into changing U.S. libel laws, which would make it easier for the government to sue the media over their reporting. Trump's rally Saturday came after he addressed the National Rifle Association convention Friday, vowing to be a champion of gun owners. During Trump's speech, Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy launched a tweet storm decrying gun violence. He posted the names, ages, and faces of 11 people who were shot to death, including 6-year-old Ana Marquez Green, 17-year-old Jordan Davis, 6-year-old Benjamin Wheeler, and 24-year-old Allison Parker. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers have reached a deal on a $1 trillion spending bill that'll keep the government funded through September. The bill does not include a number of Trump's key promises. For example, it does not include any cuts to sanctuary cities or Planned Parenthood, and includes a smaller cut to the Environmental Protection Agency than he promised. The bill also does not include any money to go to Trump's proposed expanded border wall, while it actually increases funding for the National Institutes of Health. It also includes nearly $300 million in funding for Puerto Rico's Medicaid program. Meanwhile, in more news from Capitol Hill, Republicans continue to wrangle over the terms of a new health care bill to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. On Sunday, President Trump claimed the Republican plan would guarantee coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. In fact, just a day earlier, Republican lawmakers struck a deal that would not protect people with pre-existing conditions, instead allowing insurers to charge them significantly higher premiums. Tensions continue to rise between North Korea and the United States as the U.S. aircraft carrier, the Carl Vinson, arrived in waters off the Korean peninsula and began military training drills with the South Korean Navy. The North Korean military has threatened to sink the U.S. Armada. Tensions have also been rising between the U.S. and South Korea, after President Trump claims South Korea would be forced to pay for the $1 billion THAAD missile defense system the U.S. recently began installing. On Sunday, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster assured South Korea the U.S. would pay for the missile system, despite Trump's claims last week. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has called for diplomacy to de-escalate tensions in the Korean peninsula, warning a war between the U.S. and North Korea could destroy a good part of humanity.
I always appeal for a solution through diplomatic means, because the future of humanity today, a widened war would destroy, I don't say half of humanity, but a good part of humanity, and of culture, of everything. It would be terrible. I believe today humanity is not capable of bearing it.
Meanwhile, Pope Francis is defending his use of the term concentration camps to describe some refugee centers in Europe, where thousands of people seeking asylum in Europe are imprisoned behind barbed wire. Pope Francis first made the comments a week ago, then defended his use of the term on Saturday.
Non è stato un lapsus linguae. Ci sono It was not a lapsus linguae, a slip of the tongue. There are concentration camps. Sorry, I meant refugee camps, which are real concentration camps. There are some maybe in Italy, others somewhere else, in Germany, not for sure. You think of people who are locked in a camp and cannot go out. Think of what happened in Northern Europe when they wanted to cross the sea to go to England. They are locked inside.
In Yemen, a suspected U.S. drone strike killed 5 people Sunday. The Trump administration has escalated the U.S. drone war in Yemen, launching at least 80 airstrikes over the last 2 months, this according to the Pentagon. The Pentagon says 25-year-old U.S. soldier Weston Lee died in an explosion outside Mosul, Iraq on Saturday, marking the 3rd death of a U.S. soldier in the last week. On Friday, the Pentagon released the names of 2 Army Rangers killed in Afghanistan Wednesday, 22-year-old Joshua Rogers and 23-year-old Cameron Thomas. This comes as 300 U.S. Marines have been deployed to Afghanistan's Helmand province, marking the first redeployment of U.S. troops to the area since 2014. The White House is considering sending an additional 5,000 more U.S. soldiers to Afghanistan. The White House is defending President Trump's decision to invite the Philippines president, Rodrigo Duterte, to visit the White House, despite criticism from human rights groups over Duterte's so-called war on drugs, during which thousands of people have been extrajudicially killed by police and vigilantes. Others have been held and tortured in a recently revealed secret jail in Manila, where prisoners say police have demanded bribes in exchange for their freedom. Human Rights Watch slammed Trump's invitation, saying, quote, "By effectively endorsing Duterte's murderous war on drugs, Trump has made himself morally complicit in future killings," unquote. In Brazil, tens of millions of people participated in the first general strike in more than 2 decades on Friday, shutting down public transportation, school systems, airports, and major cities to protest Brazilian President Michel Temer's austerity measures. Temer, who rose to power after the ouster of the democratically elected leader, Dilma Rousseff, currently has a popularity rating of only 4%. The Turkish government has fired another 4,000 public workers, shut down 45 civil society groups and health clinics, and blocked access to Wikipedia across Turkey Saturday in the latest escalation of the government's crackdown. A total of 140,000 public and private workers have now been fired since last summer's failed military coup. In Russia, at least 120 demonstrators were arrested in St. Petersburg on Saturday during a nationwide day of protest against Russian President Vladimir Putin. At least 30 cities participated in the protests, during which thousands of people lined up to formally present letters of dissent at government offices. Back in the United States, the National Security Agency says it's curtailing one of its controversial mass surveillance programs known as the Upstream program. On Friday, the NSA admitted an internal review found the program violated rules set by a secret surveillance court. Under the program, the NSA collected en masse Americans' communications with people abroad if their conversations simply mentioned keywords designated by the agency. On Friday, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden said, quote, "The truth changed everything." Donald Trump's counterterrorism advisor, Sebastian Gorka, is reportedly being ousted from the White House amidst reports about his links to a Hungarian far-right Nazi-allied group. The Jewish newspaper The Forward has also reported Gorka supported an anti-Semitic and racist paramilitary militia in Hungary while he served as a Hungarian politician. To see our interviews on Gorka, you can go to DemocracyNow.org. The White House is reportedly considering tapping Milwaukee County Sheriff Clark for a top job at the Department of Homeland Security. Politico reports Dave Clark could be appointed Assistant Secretary at DHS's Office of Partnership and Engagement. This comes as one of Clark's jails is currently under investigation after news surfaced that prisoner Terrell Thomas died of extreme dehydration after guards cut off the water in his solitary confinement cell for 7 days. Thomas, who suffered from bipolar disorder, is one of 4 people who died at the Milwaukee County Jail in only 6 months in 2016. A state judge in Arkansas has ordered an autopsy for Kenneth Williams, the death row prisoner who was executed Thursday, amidst reports he suffered an unconstitutionally painful death. Witnesses say during the execution, Williams was, quote, convulsing, lurching, jerking with sound. Kenneth was the last of 4 prisoners killed by the state of Arkansas over an 11-day period in April. They were trying to hit the deadline of the end of April when their supply of the execution drug midazolam expired. And today is May 1st, known as May Day, or International Workers' Day. Around the world, protests have already begun, with workers pouring into the streets in Taiwan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Greece, Iraq, Pakistan, Russia, the Philippines, Turkey, and beyond. In the United States, May Day protests are planned in hundreds of cities. They'll be led by immigrant workers, thousands of whom are expected to go on strike today to demand better working conditions and an end to President Trump's crackdown against immigration and immigrant communities. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As President Trump marked his 100th day in office Saturday, up to 200,000 people took to the streets of Washington, D.C. to take part in the People's Climate March. Sister marches were also held across the country. The Washington March took place in sweltering heat as temperatures rose into the 90s. The protesters decried President Trump's steps to roll back environmental regulations, appoint climate change deniers as the heads of government agencies, and defund and erase climate change programs and research, including the EPA's move Friday to scrub its climate science pages from the EPA's website. The People's Climate March began at dawn on Saturday with a water ceremony led by indigenous peoples at the Capitol Reflecting Pool.
My name is Gabrielle Tyack. I'm with the Piscataway Indian Nation, with the indigenous peoples of this area, the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay. Here in this location, we're actually right in front of the U.S. Capitol. And the U.S. Capitol of Washington, D.C. sits on very ancient ancestral land as well that belong to the Nuckatank people who are part of the Piscataway chiefdom. So it's a reminder that all the things that you see here are actually part of thousands of years of continuous history and presence.
My name is Pam Tao Lee. I'm from San Francisco, and I'm with the Grassroots Global Justice, and our organization is the Chinese Progressive Association. Yes, we're gathered here this morning for a water ceremony to bring together. Everybody's brought water from their local area, and each of the water has memory from the local area. And we're bringing that together. We're going to have this ceremony, and my water I have brought from Hetch in San Francisco. That's our water that we drink, and it is mixed with water from Standing Rock. The indigenous women are going to take that water to join with the local water here.
If you have water that you brought from your community, she's going to give instructions in a few minutes about how she wants you to bring it up, okay?
My name is Michelle Reed, and I'm from Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin reservation, but I actually brought water from Upper Michigan where I live, and I'm going to put it in with the rest of the water that's blessed for the march today. And there's a lot going on there with sulfide mining in Upper Michigan. It's an honor to be here and to be able to do this and bring this all the way from Michigan.
My name is Akeisha Daniels, and I'm here from East Chicago, Indiana. It was significant for me to attend because I brought water from Indiana, from East Chicago, and I thought that it would be a good ceremony to try and see if we can just combine our waters with the waters from all over the world to purify or pray for purity of the water in East Chicago as well as all over the United States. We recently just found out in August, the mayor gave us a letter saying that we needed to relocate or find somewhere to move due to the high levels of lead. Inside of my own home was 32,000 with lead and 800 with arsenic, where I've been there for 13 years with me and 3 children. So we have so much going on that people don't even know about. This has been going on for over 40 years, so yes, I think we have a climate issue in East Chicago, Indiana.
My name is Mark Bonhorst. I'm with First Universalist Church and with Interfaith Power and Light and other organizations. Well, I'm going to put a little bit of it in there, and then I'm going to put the rest in the reflecting pool. Yeah, okay. All right. Hopefully it will reflect on our lawmakers. Maybe the spirit of the water will help reach their souls, reach their minds, and we'll start doing what's right by our planet.
My name is Sheree Foytlin. I live in Rayne, Louisiana. Well, right now we're in an epic struggle to stop the Bayou Bridge pipeline, which is the tail end of the Dakota Access Pipeline, brought to us by Energy Transfer Partners, which is a horrible, horrible company. So this part would go from Nederland, Texas to St. James, Louisiana, through 700 bodies of water, and it would destroy 600 acres of our precious wetlands that protect us from storms, protect us from flooding. Like last August, my house was flooded, partially due to climate change, partially due to the oil industry cutting canals. We lived through the BP oil disaster, and we know what that oil is going to do to our shores. You know, we have oil spills out there every single day, pretty much, and so we have to live in fear of that. We have dolphins that are dying at increased rates, turtles that are dying at increased rates, and then a lot of our people are still sick from the BP oil spill and the chemicals that they sprayed out there. My message is to President Trump, and I just want to say that you need to come down and sit with our families who are suffering from our refinery communities, our environmental justice communities, and the people who are dealing still with the BP oil spill. And if you can look in their eyes and see the pain that they're still dealing with, and still continue this road where you put money and the profit of these corporations over our people, then we'll really know what kind of man you are. And until then, we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue to resist you, because you're on a destructive path that puts my house and my family directly in line of destruction, and I can't allow it.
The water ceremony on Saturday, led by indigenous peoples at the Capitol Reflecting Pool, that began the epic People's Climate March. Special thanks to Democracy Now!'s Andre Lewis and Renee Feltz. When we come back, we'll air highlights from our 5-hour special broadcast, which we did live throughout the march, which you can see in its entirety at DemocracyNow.org. Stay with us.
There's a man in the jungle. Can you hear how he cries? In a concrete jungle, under the concrete sky. Oh, how he cries. There's pain in his eyes. Oh, how he cries as his life runs dry.
Bring Back the Life by Desert Rose, here on Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As President Trump marked his 100th day in office Saturday, up to 200,000 people took to the streets of Washington, D.C. to take part in the People's Climate March. Democracy Now! Was on the streets and aired a 5-hour special. These are some of the highlights of that day.
I wanted to start by going to May Boovy. May is the head of 350.org, one of the main organizations that is running this event. Hi, May.
Hi, Amy. Good morning.
So you are standing here between the Capitol and the Washington Monument. Your thoughts on this day and why so many people are gathered?
It's a really important day today. It's the 100th day of the Trump administration, and we've seen nothing but bad news for people and for the planet, and that's why so many people are going to come.
Who came up with this?
Well, that's what's wonderful about today, is that this is truly a coming together of labor, health groups, faith groups, environmentalists, community groups. Over 900 organizations are making this happen. And we're here to show that to change everything, we need everyone. And so that is why we will see numerous people on the streets today.
So talk about the schedule of the day.
So people are starting to gather right now. We're going to assemble in different contingents, ranging from a fossil fuel contingent. The front lines will lead off the march. Youth will be in the front of the march. And then we're going to march through the Capitol, and we're going to surround the White House, and we'll all sit down there. We'll have a moment of silence, a moment of noise and exaltation of why we're all here to resist. And then we're going to go back to our communities and fight hard there, because we know that what's happening in Washington is not good for any of us, but we can actually build what we need at the local level, and that is what people are going to do.
Now, people are not only converging on Washington. How many protests and rallies do you expect throughout the country and the world?
Last I heard, there's over 300 just around the U.S. in terms of sister marches. This morning I saw photos from the marches in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in the Philippines. People are marching for clean energy, to stop coal plants, to divest. It's really, truly global, as all of these incredible demonstrations have been. This resistance is not just about the White House. It's about the fossil fuel industry taking over governments around the world. But people are not taking this quietly.
So you talked about the fossil fuel contingent. What do you mean?
That's a group of where people from all over the country who are fighting fracking and pipelines, tar sands, are going to be marching together, just like there's a faith contingent.
Just 1 second. There's someone who's taking your picture secretly, and I'd like him to take responsibility for his act. Okay, Bill McKibben, you've just photobombed this interview, and we're interested in what you have to say for yourself. Why are you here today, standing right in front of the Capitol?
Look, this is a big day and going to be an interesting one. Washington, D.C. is going to set a heat record today for the date. It's supposed to be 92 degrees. Like planets, people aren't well adapted to heat, especially this early in the season. People got to be really careful today. So people who are watching this, who are coming out to march, water, hats. We worry about warming up because too much heat's a bad thing, and today's, that's true today too.
I'm Amy Goodman, joined right now by two Indigenous leaders. We're joined by Tom Goldtooth, who is one of the founders of the Indigenous Environmental Network, and Candy Mossett. Candy Mossett is, well, the last time I saw her, we were on a sacred burial ground in North Dakota. The Dakota Access Pipeline guards had been trying to excavate it when hundreds of Native Americans came up on that property and demanded the bulldozers pull back. Candy, that was quite a scene, quite a horrific scene. But on that day, the Native Americans who were out there did stop the bulldozers from excavating.
That's right, and it was really women that broke down the fence, tore it down, went out there and jumped in front of the bulldozers, because we physically feel that pain when we see that machine digging, and they did destroy 3 sacred sites and some grave sites, but we stopped them from destroying more. And it's important to note that there's no oil flowing through that pipeline. They actually had damage occur when they dropped their own equipment into the trench and damaged 10 sections of the pipe, stuff that nobody's reporting on. After the camps were cleared, they damaged their own pipeline. So the spirits are still with us. I have a feeling they pushed the equipment into the pipe, into the trench. So
there you were in North Dakota, here you are in D.C. Why?
I'm here because it's important to do everything we can do. A march is one thing in the many tools in the toolbox. This is a really good way to come together and say we're not alone in this movement for jobs, for climate justice. And so we need to do these things to show that number 45, we don't agree with your policies. We're going to be in your face until you listen to the people that want a different way, which is towards renewable energies, small-scale distributed renewable energies, and to listen to the voice of the people.
Where are you from?
I'm from North Dakota, right in the heart of the Bakken Shale oil formation, where they're fracking us literally to death because our babies are sick, our grandmas are sick. We're not going to take it anymore, so we've been here drawing that red line of resistance.
You're a member of what tribe?
Mandan, Hiradza, Arikaran nations.
I last saw you before Dakota in, well, actually, I saw you in Paris after North Dakota.
And I told you about the abuses that have been occurring to our women. And it's an inextricable link between the rape and the abuse of the earth that happens to the women as well when these extractive industries come into our communities. It's very important that people know that we don't just speak for the North, we speak for our brothers and sisters to the South. Look at what happened to our sister, Berta. It's important that we get the message out that it's not okay for our women to die simply because we want to protect water. And we're going to continue to stand up and hold our relatives in our hearts and our minds.
You're holding up the sign for Berta Cáceres, the Honduran environmental leader who knew she was on a death list, but continued her work until she was gunned down in her own home.
That's right. And if Berta can do these things and her spirit can live on, there's no reason that we can't continue to fight here in this colonized United States. We need to stand strong with our brothers and sisters.
Had you ever met Berta Cáceres?
I never had the pleasure of meeting her in person. It was after that we went to Honduras and that we were able to see her family and friends and learn about her legacy. So I cry tears that aren't about sadness, but the joy that her spirit continues to live on and really created strength in a lot of us women.
You're wearing a t-shirt that says, "Defend the sacred."
Defend the sacred, because everything that we believe in, that we need as humanity, is sacred. The air, the water, and the soil with which we can't live without. Common sense dictates defend the sacred.
Who will you be marching with today?
I will be marching with my ancestors today and with my 3-year-old daughter, Ayana, who is here not fully understanding what it's all about, but it's really all about her.
Tom Goldtooth, you're standing beside Candy right now. Talk about your activism that has led to this day, April 29th, that it looks like it promises to be one of the hottest April 29ths in Washington, D.C. history.
I've been at the United Nations climate negotiations, and I've been at the World Social Forums, and I've been in our local communities, really building a movement of consciousness. And this is where it's coming to, this moment where we're breaking down those silos that basically capitalism, industrial mindset has created a divide of people from Mother Earth. And so we have to break that and be able to talk to humanity, that we need to come back to understanding where we're at right now. And this president right now represents tyranny. This president represents a system that is old and has to change. And as indigenous peoples, we've been talking about this moment. Maybe we as original people of the United States and our people in Canada, Alaska, maybe it's time to really exercise our sovereignty and our self-determination and serve papers on this president to deport him from this country, because the laws that he's representing are not the natural laws that we're taught as Native people to have respect for the sacredness of water. That's why we are here. We're bringing frontline communities who are fighting to keep fossil fuels in the ground. That's part of our campaign, but not just ours as Indigenous. It's for all people to come to that consciousness that we have to change the system. We have to move to a new reality, and that reality is part of Mother Earth.
Tom Goldtooth, an executive director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, just as the People's Climate March was about to begin. This is the People's Climate March. Before the march began, a group of elected leaders held a news conference right there at the reflecting pool. This is Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts.
When people were unhappy with slavery, the abolitionist movement came here and stood here to say no, that they wanted a revolution. When women wanted to have the right to vote, the suffragettes came here, where we are standing, to say that that must change. When the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, wanted a change in the laws so that African Americans and all minorities had the same rights as white people in our country, they came here and stood here. And they all were saying the same thing. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, free at last. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what the Green Revolution is now saying about fossil fuels. free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last. They will not stop this wind and solar revolution. They will not stop this all-electric vehicle revolution. They will not stop this energy efficiency revolution. They will not tell the green generation any longer that they are not going to have a planet that is safe and clean and non-polluting. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets. The only way to do this correctly is to put the preventative programs in place with the renewable energy revolution that will save the planet from the worst, most catastrophic effects. And you know what? The Green Movement does not agonize. The Green Movement organizes. And that's what is happening here today. Not just here in Washington, but all across the country. Because there is one thing that is separating the oil and coal industry on every one of these issues from the Green Movement on every single issue. We are right and they are wrong. And the Koch brothers must be sent a message that their science, which Donald Trump has adopted, is just as bogus as a degree from Trump University. We have to make sure that they know that science is what this country is all about, and that we are going to fight for science every single day until Donald Trump is no longer the president of the United States. Thank you all for being here. Let's go out there and do the job.
That was Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts standing with other Democratic elected leaders, senators, and Congress members. I later spoke to Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley, who is the kind of master of ceremonies of this press conference. Jeff Merkley, the senator from Oregon. What are you doing right now in Congress around this issue of climate change?
So yesterday, in partnership with a whole bunch of environmental groups and social justice groups, I introduced 100 by 50. It's a phrase I want everyone in the country to hear multitudinous times. 100 by 50, 100% clean and renewable energy by the year 2050. It's a goal that we've got to get completely off fossil fuels, no more burning in any sector of the energy economy, and it's a timeline. And to get there, we have to move urgently, passionately, quickly. Time is not on our side.
So you introduced this with Senator Sanders?
Yes, with Senator Sanders, Senator Markey, and Senator Cory Booker.
So how do you expect to get it through a Republican-led Senate?
Well, often you introduce legislation to prepare for the moment when you can get it through. And right now we have a Koch brother cartel. The oil and coal and gas industry is blocking environmental action. But it's very helpful at the federal level to lay out the vision. It's a statement of values. It's also a call to action. But the real point is, let's paint that picture nationally, but then let's take action at the grassroots level. And that's what this march is all about today. It's grassroots action. It's folks going to their local place of worship and saying we need a 100 by 50 plan, and what are we going to do in the next 3 years to stop our use of fossil fuels. Doing the same with their city council, with their club, with their neighbors, with so forth.
What exactly, though, does that mean? I mean, you've sketched it out. What would 100% renewable by 2050 mean?
It would mean a complete end of burning any form of fossil fuels. That's coal, that's natural gas, and that's oil.
And how would you achieve this?
Well, so in the bill, we lay out every sector of the energy economy, because each one's a little different. But one of the big strategies is to make sure that every electron on the grid is a green electron. Second of all, move as much of the energy economy onto the grid as possible. And then there'll be other difficult areas like commercial airplanes, where we're probably going to have to go to some form of biofuels. But we've got to work on every sector.
So you mentioned a Koch brothers cartel. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that there's very rich people who own a whole lot of fossil fuels. They own coal, they own oil, they own natural gas, and they want to keep extracting it and burning it. They have no concern for what it's doing to the planet. Climate disruption is affecting us everywhere. It's affecting our forests, our oceans, and our oysters, and our coral reefs. It's affecting our farmers, irrigation for farming across the country. Huge impact on rural America, which I think is important to emphasize. This is not an urban issue. This is an everywhere issue.
So you, to say the least, were very critical of Rex Tillerson in his confirmation process as Secretary of State. Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil, the largest private oil corporation in the world. Talk about your concerns then, and now that he is the Secretary of State, what you're seeing.
Well, he's spent his life traveling the world, negotiating deals to pull fossil fuels out of the ground in order to burn them. And that is not the leadership we need to address the biggest threat facing our planet. And when in his confirmation hearings, we were pressing him on his understanding of the threat of climate disruption. He basically gave platitudes like, well, it's something we need to think about and perhaps we need to be at the table, but no sense of the understanding of the damage, no understanding of the urgency, no understanding of the impact on human health. And so it's not the leadership that we need in order to address this grave threat to the planet.
You also questioned Scott Pruitt, the Oklahoma Attorney General, who's become head of the EPA. You said you didn't want the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to become the Polluter Protection Agency.
Yes, and unfortunately, Scott Pruitt has spent his career working with the fossil fuel cartel to take down environmental regulations, which increases the particulates in the air and contributes to lung cancer and to asthma, taking down the standards on mercury, and mercury is a biopersistent neurotoxin that affects the developing brains of our children. And so he's doing everything he can, this individual, Scott Pruitt, he's doing everything he can to make Americans sicker, less healthy, and more damaging to the environment.
We are here on the 100th day of the Trump presidency. Your evaluation?
100 disastrous days. Terrible days. One of the things that occurred during this 100 days was that the confirmation of President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court. This is a stolen Supreme Court seat. It's the first time in U.S. history that a seat has been stolen from one administration and delivered to another. And it was done to pack the court on behalf of the fossil fuel cartel. And so that is going to be a huge damage for decades to come.
Explain what you mean, how that's related to, how the Supreme Court is related to climate change.
There's a court decision called Citizens United. It was a 5-4 decision. It allows dark money to be spent on unlimited numbers and without identity in campaigns throughout the nation. This money was used in 2014 to give the Republicans control of the U.S. Senate, and ever since then, the Republican majority have been the puppets, and the Koch brothers have been the puppeteers. And so it's very important to this industry, this coal, oil, natural gas industry, that they keep this dark money flowing, which means keeping a Supreme Court that does not understand we the people. We the people, and here we are, the People's Climate March. This is the foundation of our government. It is the vision the founders laid out in the first 3 words of the Constitution. We the people. They put it in supersized font so that when you look at the Constitution, you see that standing out, and that's the whole principle. But they are all about, this 5-4 decision of Citizens United was all about government by and for the powerful, for the privileged, and for the polluters.
That was Oregon Senator, Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley at the People's Climate March. I also spoke to Maura Healey, who participated in the Elected Leaders News Conference, Attorney General of Massachusetts, and asked her about her role in a suit filed by a coalition of attorneys general against ExxonMobil.
Well, it was just a year ago when we sent subpoenas to Exxon to ask them a simple question. Tell us what you knew when about climate change and the impact that burning fossil fuels was going to have on the environment. Because based on widely reported, publicly available information, we had concern that Exxon may not have told the truth to the public, to consumers, to its shareholders about what it knew. We sent those subpoenas. They turned around. They sued us to try to stop us from investigating this. So far, we've been fighting it out in court. So far, we've been winning. And I hope that soon we will get the documents from Exxon so that we can have our questions finally answered. That's where we're at right now. We won in Massachusetts courts. We won in New York courts. And recently, the court in Texas dismissed the case from Texas and moved it back to New York. And we had a good hearing the other day. And we're awaiting a decision from the court, Amy. But hopefully, we'll be in a position soon where we can continue continue to go forward with our investigation so that Exxon will finally have to answer the questions that we've asked.
And explain what was the smoking gun for you? Why did you get involved with the Exxon probe?
Well, there was information publicly reported that detailed some of what Exxon's executives and scientists knew decades ago about what the effect of burning fossil fuels was going to have and going to be on the environment. And based on that information, and there was other information about oil executives flying in regularly to meet with one another to talk about how they were going to handle this as a public relations matter, and concern that there was a cover-up about this information. We were then led to do what we always do, which is when you're faced with that kind of information, you ask questions as a state attorney general, because this is a question about, was there fraud perpetrated on the public, on consumers, on even Exxon's shareholders? Did they fail to disclose things that they should have disclosed because they knew certain things? And so that's what this investigation has been about. Unfortunately, Exxon has taken the tact of trying to stop us, state AGs, from investigating.
How?
Well, interestingly enough, they say that our asking questions, our sending subpoenas to them, which is something that we do regularly as state AGs. That's our job, is to ask questions, to investigate, go where the facts take us. Instead, they sued us, claiming that our investigation interfered with Exxon's corporate free speech rights. I don't understand that theory. I don't credit that theory, but that's the theory that they've advanced. They've also, of course, tried to use Congress to shut us down as state AGs. The House committee has been led by Lamar Smith, has been very aggressive in attempting to subpoena me and really attempting to bully us into stopping us from doing our work. And these are questions that need to be asked and they need to be answered.
That is Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey. To see our full interview, you can go to DemocracyNow.org. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back to the streets of Washington, D.C. for this epic People's Climate March. Stay with us. Cry of Space and Time by Anna Coogan here on Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As President Trump marked his 100th day in office on Saturday, up to 200,000 people took to the streets of Washington, D.C. to take part in the People's Climate March. It was boiling, over 90 degrees. Democracy Now! Was on the streets, aired a 5-hour special. Ahead of the march, Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh spoke to the South African environmental activist Kumi Naidoo, the former head of Greenpeace.
Well, Africans Rising for Justice, Peace and Dignity is a new African-wide social movement that is extremely concerned about the fact that right now we are already experiencing the first and the most brutal impacts of climate change. We think it's a terrible injustice that even though the people of Africa collectively contributed the least to emissions, we are the ones that are paying the first and most brutal price, where we've got climate refugees, land that's drying up, water sources that are disappearing and so on, which is already creating quite a catastrophic situation. We feel extremely hurt that in fact the countries that carry the biggest responsibility continue to deny their responsibility, but also continue to deny the very fact that the science is absolutely clear that we have to get off dirty energy. So we're here to just bring a voice to say to the people of the United States to continue to put pressure on their governments, to recognize that if we continue on the path that we are, that when history is recorded, the United States will go down as a country that has the greatest power to avert catastrophic climate change, but abuse that power and carry the biggest responsibility for the crisis that we are currently heading towards. And people must be very clear. We are 5 minutes to midnight in terms of the amount of time we have to reverse things. It still can be done, but we need political will and we need Trump and Trump's policies to be resisted extremely strongly. So we need to break away from the idea that addressing climate change should be about advantage and competition. We have to have a greater sense of common shared purpose. And if you look at the appointments that is made in terms of the kinds of people that and their track records, their huge investments in the fossil fuel industry, it's clear that, like President George W. Bush appointed several people that did the bidding for the fossil fuel industry, Trump has even done more than what he has done. The fact that he's wanting to gut the Environmental Protecting Agency in the way that he's doing and so on is all extremely worrying signs, and it has implications not only for the people of the United States but for the people of the world as a whole. And that is why it's important that Trump must recognize, and the Republicans that support him must recognize, that it's not only a groundswell and increasing numbers of American people that are resisting. They are actually the ones now that are the best and most eloquent supporters of terrorism. They are the best and most eloquent supporters of promoting anti-Americanism, and that is something that they need to revisit and change the policies. Otherwise, the United States will become more and more isolated from global public opinion, as is the case at the moment. I think it's very important that people realize that, environmentalists like me say things like save the planet, save the environment. People must realize the planet actually does not need saving. That if we continue on the path that we are and continue to warm the planet, the end result will be we will be gone as a species. The planet will still be here. The truth is be said, if we become extinct as a species, the oceans will recover, the forests will replenish and so on. So understand that the struggle that we are engaged in is whether humanity can fashion a way to coexist with nature in a mutually interdependent relationship for centuries to come. And put differently, this struggle is fundamentally about securing our children and their children's futures. And therefore, opportunities like this for parents and grandparents and people who are planning to be parents to come out and say, not in my name, is important. But let's be very honest, we're going to need about 1,000 of these kinds of marches on an ongoing basis if we are going to be able to wrestle power from and to have the kind of policy, Trump must recognize that denialism is not a policy, right? You cannot have people saying different things. You cannot, and the one thing that you'll hear talked about a lot in the march and interviews and so on is about we must protect the Paris Declaration. So let me just say this very clearly. From an African perspective, the Paris Declaration simply gave us a chance to live to fight another day. It is far from a perfect solution to the problem. It's still not as ambitious as it needs to be. And to have now the White House and President Trump saying that they're going to actually mess with even this best agreement that the politics allowed us to get is so irresponsible. And people like Donald Trump must understand that they have blood on their hands now. The longer that they drag taking action, they are responsible for the murder of people around the world.
We are at the the People's Climate March. It's historic. It's right here in Washington, D.C. The weather, it's above 90 degrees. It is expected to be one of the hottest days in Washington, D.C. in history. And, you know, that's part of why people are out here marching, have come not only from every corner of the country, but of the globe. What's happening behind us, we're on Pennsylvania Avenue. Thousands of people have begun to march, and they're going to encircle the White House and sit down. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh, and we're here bringing you the voices of the march.
And we're joined now by two guests. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Neri Carrillo. I am Berta Cáceres' sister. I am very, very happy to be with you and tell you about my sister that we have.
Let me just say, Berta Cáceres, the Honduran environmental leader who was gunned down in her home in La Esperanza in Honduras. She was a Goldman Environmental Prize winner, fought for her community. Where do you live?
I live in Arlington, Virginia. I came here in 1972. When it was very hard to hear that my sister was killed. And only thing I can ask you is to tell the government of Honduras to do the justice, to do the right thing and find the killers of my sister, but the intellectual killers. They have 8 people in jail, but they want to kill her. They pulled the gun on her. But I asked the government of Honduras to do something about it and put the people as responsible for her death, which President Hernandez should know about this.
And he is
the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando.
And why don't you introduce yourself? You've also been working on Berta Cáceres and what's happening in Honduras.
Hi, my name is Melissa Cox. I am a Latin American solidarity worker, and right now we are calling for justice in the case of Berta. Justice for Berta means the Berta Cáceres Human Rights in Honduras Act, which is legislation in the House of Representatives right now. It is calling for a suspension of U.S. security aid to Honduras, $18 billion in security aid. Right now, we have, it was introduced by Representative Hank Johnson. We have 51 co-sponsors currently. We're asking that people call their representatives and urge them to sponsor the bill. The bill will call for suspension until which time Honduran government can, the Honduran security forces cease human rights violations, bring the perpetrators to justice of human rights violations, including the intellectual authors behind the assassination of Berta Cáceres. Berta Cáceres' sister in 1972 had to flee Honduras because of the violence there, and we have not had policy shifts for decades, and so that's why we're seeing so many people come here. And so we're asking for people to support this bill, as well as call for an independent investigation. Hundreds of organizations in the U.S. as well as in Latin America are calling for an independent investigation to the murder of Berta Cáceres.
Can you tell us about why Berta got so interested in the environment, why your sister?
Well, she was, since she was 17 years old, she used to see, my mother is a midwife in the country, and Bertita was only 17 years old when she saw the misery which the Lenca people was going through, that they have no, there was the poorest area in the Lenca people. So she got involved in that. Since she was 17 years old, and she is the founder of the COPIN, which he helped all the Lenca ethnies and all the people who has no words and very poor, and they cannot have a voice into the government of Honduras.
That is the sister of Berta Cáceres, Neri Carrillo, and activist Melissa Cox, speaking at the People's Climate March in Washington, D.C. To see our full 5-hour broadcast from the streets of Washington, D.C., one of the hottest days, one of the hottest April 29ths in D.C. history, you can go to our website at DemocracyNow.org. And that does it for our show as we continue our community media and book tour around the country. I'll be speaking tonight in Durham, North Carolina at 7 p.m. at the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Church. On Tuesday, we'll be in Miami, 6:30 at the Coral Gables Congregation Congregational Church. Then on to Wednesday in Tampa at 7:30 p.m. at the Seminole Heights United Methodist Church. On Thursday in Atlanta at 7 p.m. at the First Iconium Baptist Church. On Friday at 2 p.m. at Carleton College in Minnesota, and at 6:30 p.m. at Augsburg College in Minneapolis. On to Saturday, we're in Madison, and then the evening in Chicago. On Sunday in Kalamazoo, Lansing, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Check our website for all the details, democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Nermin Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gaddis, Diener, Sam Alkoff, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, Trina Nadura, Andre Lewis. Special thanks to Dennis Moynihan and Renee Feltz. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.